Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle Financial Controller Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Matt Wright, Senior Vice President of Customer Success at AppZen. We're excited to have Matt with us for a thought leadership titled, How to Apply AI to Fill Gaps Where P2P Systems Fall Short. Welcome, Matt, and over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll find this session informative. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. And I'll start with a little bit of a rewind of where we've come from in terms of AP automation and the technology that finance professionals have been presented by the technology marketplace. I'm on camera today, so I can't hide the gray in my beard that illustrates that I've been in this industry long enough to help organizations move out of the earliest form of invoice processing, the old manual paper process. And for those of you who might be wondering where you are on the spectrum, I think it's worth acknowledging and kind of pointing out. I work with customers who are on every stage of this journey still today. I have customers that are evolving from manual paper processes. And I'm actually, it's really kind of fascinating to see the size of the businesses that are still wrestling with manual invoice processes. But it was probably 20 or 30 years ago when OCR became the new technology that was going to be the panacea for solving invoice problems. But I think we can all acknowledge that the unstructured format that invoices come in and the constantly changing formats of invoices really challenged the business case of OCR to the point where a lot of organizations tried it and a lot of organizations moved away from OCR. In that time period, a lot of suppliers began to send their invoices to the customers as email attachments. And most customers that I was working with in this period were receiving those emails, and then they would print those emails out onto a piece of paper and then take them over to the scanner and submit them into their OCR process. So we worked through that journey. And then what has really been what I think a lot of folks have been presented by the technology marketplace today as, the remaining, technology opportunity to solve the invoice problem is to use some sort of portal solution or an electronic invoice solution. Ask your supplier to join a portal and log into that portal and upload invoices or manually enter invoices or create invoices electronically in some sort of structured format and deliver them through that bespoke process for an individual customer. But we're at a point today in 2023 and going into 24 where there is a new breed of technology that is available for finance professionals that is really anchored on artificial intelligence first as an approach to solving the problem. And I make that distinction as an AI first solution because everybody who's on this spectrum, if you go to a trade show or any kind of industry event, every single vendor that you talk to will tell you that they have artificial intelligence in their solutions. Well, I'm sure they're being truthful about that. A lot of the folks that are bringing artificial intelligence are bringing a kind of a legacy software, like an OCR software, that they've invested, millions of dollars over the years, and they can't simply throw it in the bin because artificial intelligence is the way to go. So what they do is they bolt artificial intelligence on around the edges of that technology. And while it certainly improves the outcomes of that technology, it's very different than AI first technology. And I'm going to dive into some of those opportunities of what AI first looks like as I go through the presentation today. But before I move off this slide, I think I'll kind of make my position across the spectrum is the single biggest evolution in B2B transactions for invoicing that I've seen in my career is the shift from suppliers folding up a piece of paper and sticking it in an envelope to actually emailing their PDFs to their customers. Most modern billing systems or accounting packages allow organizations to enter an accounts payable email address into their customer profile. And whenever an invoice gets ready to be sent to their customers, they simply press a button in that billing system that says send invoice. And that technology, that billing tool or that accounting package simply creates a PDF version of the invoice, creates an email, and sends it off to their customer. That's very easy for suppliers to do. That's the way that suppliers prefer to conduct business with their customers, by leveraging the technology within their billing system. So I thought it would be interesting. I think a lot of us in AP and finance are really, I ask this question in every audience that I present a topic similar to this. How many folks in finance or in AP that are focused on the invoice problem understand what the AR side of the business is? And there, I'm surprised. I expect higher percentage. I get maybe 10, 15% of folks are working in both AP and AR. So I thought it was worthwhile to put a little context around what it's like to work in accounts receivable. I think most of the folks on this call came here today because you're interested in learning about accounts payable automation. So let's just look at it through the lens of what it's like to be in accounts receivable. So if I'm an AR clerk, I sit down at my desk in the morning and I need to send out my invoices for the day. So I log into my billing system. I have a button that says send all invoices that are ready to be sent. I press that button and all of those invoices fly out of my billing system and they get delivered to my customers' AP inboxes, right? So emails are generated, PDFs are attached, and they're all sent out. And that's, comprises about 95% of the invoices that I need to send to my customers that day. And it takes about 5% of my time to conduct that. The remaining 5% of my invoices that I need to send, these are the customers that have asked me to submit my invoices through some special or specified way for them. So either uploading an invoice to some FTP site or logging into a portal. So if I log into a portal, I get these myriad of portals that I need to connect to. I need to remember these URLs. What if a lot of times I forget a password, I have to do a password reset. Some of these solutions require me to manually enter the invoices, right? So, again, maybe being a little bit hyperbolic here, but maybe 5% of these invoices take 95% of my time to send out. And the real tragedy here is, while I'm in AR today and I know how to do all of this for this specific set of customers that I do business with, if I decide that tomorrow I'm not really into AR, I'm going to leave this job and I walk out the door, all of these special operating procedures that I have figured out and built into my practice, they walk out the door with me, right? So it's delicate information and challenging to retain. So after I finish my morning of sending invoices, I go take a lunch break. I have a pizza, and then I come back after lunch and I dive into the next portion of my day, which is collections, right? So I send invoices and then I find out when I'm going to get paid. So about half of my time I'm going to spend writing some emails. So I'll send 50 quick emails in the first hour. I'll get some responses back. And while I'm getting those responses back, I'll send a few statements out to my customers and ask them to reconcile those statements. And then I'll do a little bit of updates into my billing systems to help me forecast my cash and help my treasury team understand when I'm going to get paid. But then I go back into the remainder of my afternoon. And again, about half of my time solving for 5% of my invoices, I dive right back into the portal drama again, logging into portals, password resets, forgot URLs. Sometimes I find invoices that I go into this portal looking for a specific set of invoices, and then I remember, oh, I forgot for this type of invoice for that customer, I won't find it in the portal. I have to send an email because those invoices are not in this portal solution. There's something else, right? So some invoices are portal driven, others are not, right? So at the end of this day, I'm ready to put my feet up and celebrate that I've made it through my journey of navigating all of the portals, and I'm ready to do battle the next day. So just a little context of that's what it's like to be in accounts receivable. So what that translates to AP shops and finance professionals who have tried to implement portal technology is this kind of portal adoption wave that we see. And I think this is pretty predictable. And anybody who's on the call who's tried one of these portal projects probably can, relate to the shape of this curve. So the way that this works is somebody sponsors a project that says, let's go drive this portal initiative. And all of you folks in accounts payable, you're going to have a new hat that you wear, and you're going to be our new supplier onboarding team, and you're going to drive adoption to this portal. So you're going to reach out to these suppliers. But before you reach out, you probably want to check with procurement, because we might need to talk to the contacts that procurement talks to, and ask procurement maybe even if they could help enforce this policy of asking suppliers to join the portal. So now we've got the finance team driving an initiative that creates value for finance, but we're going to go and ask the procurement team to leverage their relationships and ask the suppliers to do something special on behalf of my business for finance. Now, implicit in that is if you think about what procurement's real kind of key performance indicator as a procurement professional is my job is to get the lowest price possible for any good or service that I procure, right? And if I'm asking my supplier to do something special for me and change the way that I do business for them, I'm inserting some friction into that conversation. And then I'm effectively reducing the leverage that I have to negotiate with that supplier. So these finance-driven initiatives that have bespoke methods for suppliers to adhere to, they have an inherent element of friction associated to them. So that's an important concept that we shouldn't overlook. But if you look at the time curve, maybe over the course of a year or so, we get to some level of adoption. If we do a really good job and we have a pretty severe consequence for non-compliance, maybe we get to 60% of the suppliers are willing to do this. The other 40% just say, I'm just not going to do it. This isn't for me. I'm not going to do that. And then over time, those suppliers, those AR clerks, some of those AR clerks leave. Some of those AR clerks, they forget the password for the 5th time and they just say, forget it. And they just start emailing invoices. And we see this decline, right? And after a couple of years into the project, everybody looks around and goes like, hang on a second, we were at 60%. Now we're back down to 40%. We got to restart this onboarding event. So, hey, AP, put your onboarding hats on, reach out to procurement again. Let's get back in touch with those suppliers and let's drive adoption again, right? And this is just cyclical. It doesn't change. This is a proven, commodity with these portals technologies. And it's what most folks in finance have been presented in the past 10 years as the pinnacle of technology. But we have a new era that we're in, and I think it's really exciting for us to think about, which is the momentum of artificial intelligence and how fast it's changing. So this is just a little bit of context. 37 years ago, there was a SICK project started with the aim of creating an artificial intelligence engine that could mimic the intelligence of an 8-year-old. At the moment, that's still not finished. Using what a lot of the technology providers in the space today call their version of artificial intelligence, which is machine learning, the simplest, earliest version of artificial intelligence. We're way beyond machine learning. There is much, much bigger technology. One of those technologies is something that was started 6 years ago by the Google team. And within 6 years, the large language models that are in place today are using transformer technology, which is the core of GPT, that is already surpassing the intelligence of an 8-year-old. And this only took 6 years to achieve. So the pace of innovation that we're seeing in artificial intelligence is accelerating rapidly. And now we're starting to see organizations apply that artificial intelligence to long-standing finance problems that have inherent obstacles that are very, very difficult to overcome, not the least of which is the AP inbox, right? So the way that AppSend thinks about solving finance problems with technology is to solve the problems the way that suppliers are introducing those problems to the finance organizations. So suppliers want to email their PDF invoices. We talked about that at the beginning of the presentation. So AppSend has a technology called autonomous accounts payable, where we extract PDF invoices from emails, and then we extract all of the data. We perform large language model, natural language processing, computer vision to extract and predict the accounting for non-PO invoices, perform very sophisticated PO line matching algorithms, and automate the entire invoice process using our autonomous AP product. Suppliers are also flooding those AP inboxes with all kinds of things relative to accounts payable, that not the least of which is inquiries of when am I going to get paid, but here's a W-9, here's an invoice, here's an invoice, here's an invoice. And those are all duplicate invoices because they're not sure when they're going to get paid, right? All of those things that are flooding the AP inbox can now be attacked using artificial intelligence. And AppSend released this new product earlier this year called the AppSend Inbox. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So the principle of applying transformer technology and generative AI to the AP inbox is to allow artificial intelligence to organize the inbox, process certain transactions, and respond to those transactions. So I'm going to go through an example of each of these in a moment here and walk through some of these. So the first one is just labeling and categorizing the emails. We conduct polls and studies and ask AP organizations how much of their time is spent managing the AP inbox. We see numbers that range between 20 and up to 35% of the entire AP team's time is spent just managing the AP inbox. It is a very large problem. As we talked about on my very first slide, the biggest shift in invoicing that's happened in accounts payable is not to portals or not to some sort of electronic invoicing. It's the transition from paper invoices being sent by mail to PDF invoices being sent by email, which is just flooding the AP inbox. So the first piece of technology that we've brought with the AI for the inbox tool is to just simply categorize the emails and put them into buckets. Here's W-9s, here are statements, here are invoices, here are inquiries, here are account changes, right? And then the AP team can come in and decide which of those buckets they want to prioritize and work on at that category level, right? But we can do more than that. Using generative AI, we're able to read the email and understand what that supplier is saying to accounts payable. And we can generate responses, again, using generative AI. So if a supplier sends a W-9, we can acknowledge that we've received your W-9 and send an email back to the supplier saying, thank you, we've got it. If we have any more questions, we'll reach out to you, right? Just that small level of assurance from the customer knowing, okay, they've got my W-9. I know that's a step in the process for me to get paid. They've acknowledged that I got it. I don't need to worry about that any longer. But what if we go even a step further and we get the real bane of the AP inbox, right? Which is, when am I going to get paid? I sent you an invoice last week. When am I going to get paid? These queries can be as rich as, can you please tell me when I will be paid on invoice number 235167 that I sent on May 14th? Or they can be as vague as, can you please tell me when I will be paid on the invoice that I sent last week? Using generative AI, the technology is able to not only read and understand that email, but then it's also able to compose a query, and we can go out and query the database and bring back the answers to that question. And then not just stop at getting the answers, but also propose an email, the whole body of the email, to write back to the supplier. And then we present that back to accounts payable, and accounts payable can review that composition and decide if they want to make some small adjustments to it, or if they just want to use that and send it. So drastically streamlining the level of effort required for accounts payable teams to handle inquiries. One of the other cool things is, if a supplier submits an invoice and we submit it into processing, and then they didn't hear back from us, they weren't sure, so they sent another invoice. So now we have a duplicate invoice. What this technology is able to do is take that duplicate invoice, submit it into the processing engine. If we determine that it's a duplicate invoice, rather than reject it as a duplicate, we will propose an email back to the supplier and say, thank you for sending us this invoice. We actually received that invoice last week. It's in process and it's scheduled to be paid on this date, right? So we're not just rejecting and telling them it's a duplicate. We're actually solving what they're really trying to get to, is, when am I going to get paid on this thing? That's more often the reason that suppliers send duplicate invoices, is they're uncertain when they're going to get paid. So we solve all of that in one loop. We can also handle multiple invoice inquiries, right? So if a supplier sends us a table of, hey, can you please tell me when I'm going to be paid on these invoices? We can compose a complex query, bringing back an array of invoices, and propose that back to the supplier as well. Now, let's take a quick shift, and we talked a lot about the inbox, but let's talk about the invoice transaction itself. What happens when I get that invoice transaction? How can I use artificial intelligence to process that? So what artificial intelligence really is, in its truest form, is a pattern matching engine. And the way that artificial intelligence automates the invoice transaction is it extracts all of the data in very, very accurate techniques, using large language models, natural language processing, and computer vision that far exceed the accuracy of OCR. And we create a pattern. This is a pattern that we can then store in our library and associate it with all of the answers to the invoice. If you think about accounts payable's primary job, it's to figure out how to answer the questions associated with paying an invoice. Who do I pay? How much do I pay? And how do I account for that payment, right? So that's what these question marks represent. So if I've seen this invoice before, I will go and submit it into my AI engine, and we'll scroll through our pattern library, and we'll look for a pattern that matches this invoice, an invoice I've seen before. When I find that pattern, I'm able to apply those answers back to this invoice and process it autonomously without any human intervention, and achieve a touchless process. So the summary here of what we're presenting to you today is, at its core, if you think about the technology that finance professionals have been presented with historically, is they simply cannot, where they really fall down is the fact that the inputs to finance operations are constantly changing. And that's what this legacy technology cannot adapt to. I'll make the kind of bold statement that if an organization were to get the same invoices from the same suppliers, and those were never changed, we could achieve 100% automation with zero touch with the technology that we have today. But everybody on this call knows that's not the reality of the way finance operations work and what the accounts payable problem represents. As soon as I launch a new product or open a new location, my inputs change. And the technology that we've been using up to this point is not able to adapt to those changes. But with artificial intelligence, we see a different curve. So when we come out of the gate, we know these invoice transactions, we're building our library and we're predicting accurately based on history. But if we launch a new product, I'm going to get invoices from new suppliers, or there'll be new goods or new services appearing on these invoices that I don't know how to process. And that's what represents this downturn here. What this downturn represents is the artificial intelligence engine seeking input from humans to say, I don't know how to process this transaction. Can you please help me? And the humans will say, oh, yes, I'll develop that information. I'll figure out who the vendor is. I'll figure out what the GL account for that particular good or service is. And each of those inputs unlike traditional technology, is retained by artificial intelligence. This is the learning element of artificial intelligence. And once we've seen enough of those, we start to recover and we go back into increasing our automation rates again until something changes again. So we can see this. We see this with our customers, this steady up and down of their automation rate, but it's always up and to the right, always improving. And what's really magical about this improvement is there's no technology investments being made to achieve these curves back up and to the right. Nobody is coming in and adding a new template. Nobody is making a change to the technology that's solving these problems. So it's really exciting technology that we're presenting today. I think 2024 represents a new paradigm for AP organizations and finance operations. So I encourage you to explore artificial intelligence for your businesses and look forward to hearing from you. I think at this point, with 5 minutes left, I'll pause and see if I can answer a few questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt, for such an insightful presentation. We had a few questions come through. We could go ahead and review those now. This one question asks, what recommendations can you make for an organization struggling to budget for the right portal or tool to use?
Yeah, so right, it comes down to the business case, right? Any technology solution has to justify the investment. And I think you're spot on in thinking about, how do I justify the business case for a portal solution? And what I would advise you is to be very conservative about that adoption rate that you're expecting in a portal solution. And that's one of the big contrasts between a portal technology and artificial intelligence technology. Portal technology requires some level of adoption to achieve the business case. Artificial intelligence achieves 100% adoption by default because the artificial intelligence attacks the entire invoice population. So you can realize and predict and have a much stronger business case that's much more predictable using artificial intelligence than you can with a portal technology.
Excellent. Thank you. This next question, can the apps and inbox be accessed by suppliers? Is it similar to a supplier portal?
Well, it's different than a supplier portal in the sense that the way that a supplier interacts with the inbox is by sending it an email, which is what they do naturally day to day. So when I want to interact with the AppSend inbox, I would send an email to my customer that says, hey, I sent you this invoice last week. When am I going to get paid? And the interaction back to that supplier comes in the form of an AI generated email, which interpreted that email sent by the supplier, performed a query against the accounts payable database, returned the information, composed an email, and sent it to the supplier. So they absolutely interact with the inbox, but they don't have to join a portal, remember a password, or incur any fees associated with that portal technology.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have time for a couple more questions. This next question, how can the AppZen AI solution help in terms of invoice data entry validation, which was auto-captured by existing OCR and existing portals?
So our artificial intelligence for autonomous AP can work on a handful of different inputs, right? So we can work on the PDF or even scanned images. Our technology works on both. So we can extract the data, process the information, but we can also work on XML or portal submitted invoices that have already been converted into electronic format. And we can perform the final step of the accounting processes. So for non-PO invoices, we can use artificial intelligence to predict the GL accounts and cost centers and who the first approver should be. For PO-based invoices, we can perform the PO line matching, very, very complex PO line matching algorithms with multi-line POs, multi-line invoices, and perform the matching across all of those. Unit of measure reconciliation, all of those hard things artificial intelligence solves for beyond just the extraction step. And I think that's an important point and a great question that you've asked, which is extraction is just a step in the process of accounts payable. Artificial intelligence, true AI first technologies go beyond that first step and solve for the entire accounting of an invoice transaction.
Great, thank you. And we have one last question. What are the risks associated with using AI or ML for AR and AP processes?
Yeah, as with any technology, the risks are in achieving the right level of learning and making sure that the technology is using accurate predictions and relying on humans in the right places. So any AI technology has to have that human in the loop to present transactions or present fields or present scenarios that it needs some confirmation. If I haven't seen enough instances of that particular scenario, artificial intelligence needs to present that to a human for confirmation so that it can learn how to process those transactions going forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much, Matt, for such an amazing presentation. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you again, Matt.
Thank you.